I'm going to start with a clip of. I'm going to start with a clip of Dizzy Gillespie on Sesame Street, and I think it's probably best if we just watch that first. And just... So that was a clip of Dizzy Gillespie on Sesame Street in 1984. Just to place this into a wider context, this is part of my main research is about recorded music for children and broadcasting for children. I've got a book coming out next year. It's called Spinning the Child, about how recorded music constructs childhood. This paper today is really a very much shortened version of a paper that will be appearing in the Jazz Research Journal. It's much more broadly about jazz on children's TV, so just thinking if you want to speak to me afterwards about jazz in Hollywood cartoons, in the Fleischer cartoons like Betty Boop, in Disney, I guess, in Mickey Mouse, and his roots in minstrelsy, in Dumbo, the Jungle Book, 101 Dalmatians, Lady and the Tramp. Also the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, I guess, like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Top Cat, and the Yogi Bear Show. If you want to speak to me about it, that's for outside this room. Focus today is specifically about jazz music on Sesame Street and the Muppet Show, and the role of jazz in children's TV as education. So, jazz music in children's television communicates complex and frequently subversive messages about the child. As a musical and visual style, jazz opens up otherwise untapped semiotic possibilities, potential sites of meaning not offered by more widely used genres of music for children. Whether as soundtrack, theme tune, or live performance on children's television, jazz music provides the opportunity of resistant readings that frequently undermine the very construction of childhood. With a focus on Sesame Street and the Muppet Show, I discussed how jazz has been used purposefully in the context of education and television to communicate issues of race, gender, and sexuality. So, jazz on television is a musical visual language. Nicholas Pillai refers to it as the dissonant image to describe not only the disruptive, sometimes improvisatory visuals that strive to portray the emotional potential of jazz on screen, but also the metaphorical rupture that jazz as audiovisual culture inflicts on societal norms. In many respects, jazz is problematic in the context of childhood. As a discourse, jazz is a fluid network of ideas, attitudes, and values that creates common assumptions. It signifies age and experience, sexuality and race, and as Pillai puts it, quote, dancing, drinking, and casual pickups, unquote. As such, jazz sits uncomfortably with a post-Enlightenment Western childhood normalized as white, heterosexual, and middle class, and there are the references. In the context of a special and protected audience, jazz breaches the mythologized walled garden of childhood, offering the child a glimpse of the ambiguous and unresolved adult world outside. This paper aims to answer 3 questions. Firstly, why is jazz in children's musical culture the exception rather than the rule? Secondly, how does jazz construct the child viewer in the context of children's television? Thirdly, how has jazz music been used for educational purposes on children's television? Children's music in the 20th century primarily consisted of folk music and music hall. In the 21st century, contemporary chart music has come to dominate. My analysis of the 89 albums and 570 songs released by Sesame Street between 1970 and 1984 showed that only 11 of the 570 songs were jazz, even when I pulled in ragtime. And of the 850 songs on the 120 episodes of The Muppet Show, jazz comprised no more than 10%. So, Sesame Street started in 1969 on national educational television. Forged in an era of civil rights, second-wave feminism, and significant public funding for education, Sesame Street had a remit to raise the educational levels of black and Hispanic preschool children from the ages of 3 to 6 years old. The content was based on a self-written, annually updated curriculum that, as well as numbers, letters, shapes, etc., included personal development and pro-social values. Sesame Street used quick-fire segments based on television adverts and adult variety comedy television shows. It had adult cast members rather than presenters, on-screen children deliberately not from stage schools. It was 1 hour long and broadcast as early as 6 a.m. As well as the use of more traditional and by 1969 largely out-of-date educational methods of rote learning and explicitly didactic instruction, Sesame Street drew on the progressive educational philosophies of people like John Dewey, who in 1897 wrote that, quote, "School must represent present life, real and vital to the child," unquote. Sesame Street producer Joan Cooney insisted that Sesame Street must, quote, "sound like 1969, unquote. In their pursuit of pedagogical outcomes, Sesame Street turned more readily to soul, funk, and Latin American music, contemporary styles more familiar to non-white urban viewers than jazz. However, jazz underpinned some of the show's most memorable educational segments. Similarly, Jazzy Alphabet from 1974 was a piece of visualised hard bops performed by Donald Byrd and the Blackbirds, perfectly complemented by Vince Collins' minimalist perspective-bending animation. These clips position the child in the arena of the avant-garde. This age-inclusive gesture provides young viewers with a range of non-focalised semiotic possibilities that make little concession for the child as a special and separate audience, and are open to a wealth of interpretations. Next, I want to compare how performances by the same jazz artist on Sesame Street and the Muppets produce very different readings. We've already watched Dizzy Gillespie perform on Sesame Street in 1984, so here's his performance on The Muppet Show.
Swing low, sweet Cadillac, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. Oh, an Eldorado coming after me, coming for to carry me home.
In 1979, Gillespie performed Swing Low, Sweet Cadillac, a song he had previously released on a live album in 1967. Inexplicably, the set is designed as a Middle Eastern court or palace. Gillespie and the Muppet musicians wear turbans and fezzes, while two female Muppets with bare midriffs and flowing scarves dance either side of Gillespie's head. And do a little bit of booty shaking in there as well. The call and response vocal section, there was a much longer bit at the start which I cut off, where he scripts the intended audience participation, call and response. In contrast to his solo, introverted and studied performance on Sesame Street, Gillespie's performance on The Muppet Show actively seeks the audience's attention and interaction. Gillespie's conga playing has a strong Cuban rather than Eastern or North African influence, while the mention of Cadillacs and Eldorados introduces a sense of materialism that is absent from the money-free Sesame Street. Sesame Street never mentioned money, or very rarely, or jobs or anything like that. On Sesame Street, Gillespie makes no eye contact with the camera, the off-screen live band, nor with the mix of adults and children seated around him. The clip features lingering close-ups and crossfades of Gillespie's trumpet, his fingers, and his enormous inflated cheeks. This is an audio-visual construction of seriousness and concentration. Sesame Street's adult human cast members, 3 black and 1 white, sit behind Gillespie, nodding their heads and tapping their fingers, seemingly transported by the music as if at a real live jazz gig. The camera remains fixed on Gillespie, mimicking the voyeuristic gaze of a gig goer. The wide camera shots on The Muppet Show frame Gillespie as part of a band. There are fewer close-ups of Gillespie playing the trumpet than in the Sesame Street footage, less chance for viewers to study the fingering or the breathing. Sharp cuts are used rather than fades. Gillespie and other stars such as George Benson, Dinah Shore, Nina Simone, Ray Charles and Tony Bennett were included as guests on Sesame Street deliberately to appeal to urban, black, carers, adults in a bid to increase children's educational attainment through co-viewing. That's how that Sesame Street phrase, co-viewing. While Sesame Street makes many concessions to children as a special audience, The Muppet Show's prime time scheduling, its use of intertextual references, Gillespie's solo references other songs, and its extensive use of archaic, previously released music points to a loosely defined audience, one of families, family groups rather than children, a mass rather than individuals, one seeking entertainment rather than education. In an effort to reposition himself as a mass audience entertainer rather than an educator of children, Jim Henson deliberately pushed the boundaries of acceptability on The Muppet Show. The first 2 series feature a number of sexualized violence clips, either on or with the female human guest star. Set in what appears to be a dark jazz club, Rita Moreno attempts a sincere version of Fever.
Never know how much I love you, never know how much I care. When you put your arms around me, I get a fever that's so hard to bear. You give me fever when you kiss me, fever when you hold me tight. Fever in the morning, fever all through the night. Oye, buddy, nada más quiero decirte que no se debe hacer eso. It's not nice. ¿Entiendes? Mírame a mí cuando te hable. Este es mi número. Y si tú me fastidias más, te voy a dar una garnata que te va a dejar bobo. Cool it. Sun lights up the morning, moon lights up the night. I light up when you call my name, 'cause you know I'm gonna treat you right. You give me fever when you kiss me. Fever when you hold me tight. All through the night.
My kind of woman!
Her red dress, bare back and shoulders, sensual arm movements, and mannered vocal delivery are archetypes of Hollywood's femme fatales and sultry swing jazz vocalists of the 1940s. Moreno's concentration and sustained eye contact with the camera are shattered by drummer Animal's overly enthusiastic drum rolls, oral expressions of his lust for her. Moreno berates Animal in Spanish, telling him to cool it, something he finds impossible to do. After Animal hits a sustained solo, Moreno smashes his head between two handheld cymbals. Echoing a Ruth Busby sketch in the previous episode, Animal, excited by the mix of violence and sexuality, shouts, "My kind of woman," before slumping over the drums. Whilst the clip can be contextualised by reference to feminism's second wave, it offers a complex representation of sex and violence. The thrill that Animal gets while being physically assaulted adds a multifaceted psychosexual dimension to an arena clearly designed through the use of puppets and humour to appeal to children as social actors in wider social groups, families. Jazz on The Muppet Show offers a glimpse of an adult world full of risk, complexity, grey areas, and unresolved narratives. Compared to Sesame Street, Jazz on The Muppet Show dissolves childhood as a separate category. More accurately, it simply does not construct the category in the first place. Unrestricted by on-screen audiences of real children and unburdened by a child-focused curriculum, The Muppet Show was free to entertain its mass audience with contentious material. Furthermore, the jazz-based sketches on Sesame Street and The Muppet Show have the semiotic potential to grow with the child as they develop. As Stuart Hall points out, family viewing fosters, quote, argument, comment, debate, and discussion, unquote. In conclusion, jazz music in children's television has been used to deliver specific curriculum goals, including those around race, ethnicity, and knowledge of self. Equally, the dissonant images and jazz soundtrack sketches on The Muppet Show create semiotic spaces in which children can, quote, grow sideways, unquote, as Catherine Bond Stockton puts it, into their sexuality and racial identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fascinating paper. So, time for a few questions. Yes?
A couple of questions which are totally unrelated, but first was just if you had any particular reading of the kind of exoticism going on in that Muppet sketch with Gillespie, if you got any way of reading that. And the other one was...
the answer. I don't know what you mean by it. So yeah, please explain the question in a bit.
Sorry, the kind of apparent reference to the Middle East, Gillespie dressed up like that.
It's inexplicable.
Okay.
It's very difficult. What I think they've done is just a very clumsy nod to race and ethnicity.
Right.
If you understand, it's very difficult to comprehend it. I know Gillespie's live show, you know, he was quite an extravagant performer at various points, using comedy and dance and costume, I guess.
Yeah.
It might have been his idea. Who knows? I don't know.
He used to wear trademark fez.
Right. Okay.
that's
Yeah.
true, isn't it?
So, you know, that kind of links into...
Yeah, I mean, the Muppet Show is a British production, and they worked very quickly. They went through the episodes very quickly, and they had to produce more material for the British shows than they did for the American shows because of the different lengths in advertisement time. Might have even just been a bit of set that they had used for something else, which is not uncommon.
Maybe they were going to do Night into this era and change their mind at the last minute.
Who knows? Don't know.
So
Yeah, right.
The other bit of the question was that someone who, for various reasons, watches a lot of British children's television, because it's on at home at the moment, it's surprising to me how much of it has jokes in which are clearly designed for adults to get, not for children to get. So the kind of two layers going on, the layer that's designed for the adult who might be watching along with the child.
Mm-hmm. Always, yeah, true. Most of the children's culture that I've looked at, that happens.
Right.
It's genre independent. Although there is, you know, a certain body of work, television, you know, recorded music that will target what I call kiddified children's music that puts a very special, very safe space around childhood, constructs it in a very anodyne way, shall we say. It's not leak-proof, if you understand. You know, everything's open to interpretation from adults looking into that culture. But it's the sort of thing that potentially wouldn't appeal to adults, potentially not even in a kitsch way, if you understand. There's certain, you know, musical artists, I guess, that are not sustaining my interest in any academic way or, you know, any aesthetic way, because the music is so constructed, there's no adult references. It doesn't refer to a wider culture. It's boxed, it's that walled garden thing. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon in itself, but yeah, you're right. And then, so the question is, why does the music or the TV show nod to adults? Why does it use its text? Why does it use adult references? And obviously that's, you know, there's different strategic reasons why they might do that. Mostly to do with commercial reasons, generally. It's the adults that are the purse holders of children's culture and the gatekeepers, I suppose. And from Sesame Street's point of view, because they were testing the curriculum year on year through audience research, it was a huge part of their remit.
Yeah.
They found that if you've got adults sitting in the same room, able to engage in kind of discursive, you know, conversations about the content, that it did increase educational attainment around certain elements of numeracy and literacy.
Any other question?
Just curious if you're interested or have done any work yet on the Sesame Street YouTube channel, which I spend a lot of time looking at, talking to Nick Pillai about, and just because it's amazing. And I don't remember any clips that were jazz actually, but just in terms of the kind of self-historicization of the show as an institution, now that's moved to HBO and all those sorts of things, if you had any thoughts on that kind of way we're
my research
digesting
is in
it.
a sort of the pre-Elmo era. Most of it is based around the records, these huge quantity of albums that they pumped out, up to 13 albums a year during the 70s, really. What I would say is that we're talking about Sesame Street rather than Muppet. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm talking about and music clips in particular. So they do show like the Stevie Wonder and that era.
I would say that there's this certain element of a historicism in Sesame Street as was, you know, from day one, because of the way that funding works and the way that producing that amount of original content, they clearly took segments and just, you know, inserted new segments, and they chose which ones to keep. And so I think it's the Dizzy Gillespie clip in the episode when it was originally broadcast in 1984. The clip that came before it was from 1972, and the clip that came after it was from 1972 as well. So you get this sense that they kind of, I don't know, can constantly create some sort of greatest hits, or if they're responding to the curriculum, they pull in these little, you know, animations or songs or whatever it might be to create that.
It's it's interesting, but ahistorical, but also depending on if I'm watching it with my kid and they show one of those old clips that I remember as a kid, I mean, you know, there is some history there, intergenerational.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying about.
Yeah, but you know that it's old, but your child might not know. It feels, you know, this obviously things that the child might pick up on. That they might get it's old-fashioned, but they might not.
Yeah, I see.
Because again, especially Sesame Street was very good at doing retro-themed stuff anyway. Back in the day.
Yeah.
Chris Surf was the guy that did all the pastiche stuff, so they'd do a little doo-wop song and, you know.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.